On today's show, the saga continues as Steve Ballmer speaks again about how he is quite confident that the Clippers will be okay. Adam Silver clarifies his comments from the Board of Governors press conference, and Mark Cuban continues his tirade in defense of the Clippers. Going to be talking about it all on today's Locked On Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. You were locking in with the Clips. Thank you for making Locked On Clippers the first listen of your day, your team every day. I'm your host, Darian Vaziri, born and raised in LA, been a Clipper fan for 20 years, been covering the team on my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for 5 and 3 years right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know every single time we post a video on the road to 8,000 subscribers, and you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. In this episode, we're going to be continuing the saga, the hottest story in the NBA, the investigation, the allegations against our LA Clippers about cap circumvention. I'm going to be talking about Steve Ballmer speaking out again, Adam Silver speaking again, Pablo Torre's continued coverage, and of course, Mark Cuban's crazy tirade in defense of your LA Clippers. So let's begin with Steve Ballmer, who recently was on or interviewed by the Sports Business Journal, and he said he is quite confident the team abided by league rules and continues to welcome an investigation. So what does it say that about this whole thing that Steve Ballmer feels quite confident? I mean, it makes me feel good as a Clipper fan because you think Steve's feeling good. He's got all his, bases covered. We're innocent. But what's he supposed to say, right? He's not going to say, oh, we're guilty, or, oh, I'm nervous. You know what I'm saying? He's going to have to say that he's confident that everything's going to be okay. But let me ask you this, Clipper Nation. Does his confidence, or does his statement of confidence, make you any more confident? Because right now what we have is everyone that's not a Clipper fan thinks we're guilty, guilty, guilty. And everybody that's a Clipper fan is saying, oh, guilty. Oh, sorry, innocent until proven guilty. So Ballmer, keeps saying the same things, that we're going to welcome the investigation. We're not afraid of anything. We never cheated. Any deal between Kawhi and Aspiration was between Aspiration and Kawhi. It didn't have anything to do with us. And he said, quote, the important thing is our relationship with the company and the players' relationship with the company were independent. I feel quite confident in that. We abided by the rules. And so I welcome the investigation that the NBA is doing. It's a great way from our perspective to get the facts out there. And he said, there's nothing fun about being highlighted in this way. It's a whole lot more fun to be highlighted for building a great arena, but this too shall pass. I feel very good about what we did, and we welcome the NBA taking a look at it and hopefully agreeing with us. So again, if you're Steve Ballmer, if you're the Clippers, you just want to get this over with so we can focus on this season, this second year in Intuit Dome, the addition of Brook Lopez, Bradley Beal, and John Collins to what was an already solid team, a fully healthy season of Kawhi Leonard, and of course, bringing in, I guess that was it, right? I mentioned everybody: Chris Paul, Bradley Beal, John Collins, Brook Lopez, healthy season of Kawhi, in this second season at Intuit. Like we were talking about before this investigation started. Selfishly for me, this investigation and these allegations have brought a bunch of views to the channel, so it's great for me. But for the team, we want this over with so we can get back to business. Training camp's about to start. We got media day in 12 days. Hopefully I'll be there. I'm trying to figure it out, but no, I'm not going to say anything that's going to get me in trouble on this, but it's been a process, to say the least. Anyway. So Steve Ballmer feels confident. I'm happy that he does. We're just going to have to wait and see. I like the way he's talking. But let's talk about Adam Silver real quick, right? Adam Silver was kind of asked again about I think he was talking to, I think they're called front office sports. And he said, we will get to the bottom of this, because he was asked about it again. He said, we will get to the bottom of this. We will be thorough. And this is my favorite part. We will begin with a presumption of innocence, not a presumption of guilt. So everybody wants Adam Silver with all this circumstantial evidence to get his pitchforks out and get ready to impose sanctions on us. But Adam Silver is not going to operate that way. Why would Adam Silver believe Pablo Torre over Steve Ballmer? He definitely has a closer relationship with Steve Ballmer than Pablo Torre. He literally said his name Pablo. I mean, what the hell? Like, that is the most uncultured pronunciation I've ever heard. So, Pablo Picasso, is that how he pronounces it? So, anyway, Adam Silver, it seems like even though everyone keeps saying the Clippers can get hit with circumstantial evidence, it doesn't have to be, concrete. It seems like Adam Silver is not going to make some big decision or impose some huge penalty if it is not concrete. That's just what I'm getting from all the comments that he's made at that press conference and the comment he made in this interview as well. He also backtracked, though, which I don't think this is a good look for him. But Adam Silver is I don't think very highly of Adam Silver anyway. So this is pretty on brand for him in my eyes. But he goes, I meant in the context of the accusations here. Because, no, they asked him about, you said you didn't even hear about Aspiration. You never even heard of the brand. And he said, I meant in the context of the accusations here. I mean, I certainly was aware of the brand. So that's a little bit of a backtrack from what he said, saying I'd never even heard of Aspiration before, which makes him look a little suspicious. Now, coming up, I'm going to talk about how Pablo Torre responded to that very statement from Adam Silver, and then we're going to get into the Mark Cuban tirade he's been going on defending us, and there's a lot there, so we're going to go a little slowly with that. Going to be talking about that coming up. I got to tell you a little something about Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401s, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. I started using Monarch Money just to organize my finances because I didn't know what I was paying for, and it really helped me clean those up and save me a lot of money. Not joking. Monarch is built for people like me with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNBA. All right. So let's talk about how Pablo Torre responded to these statements that were made by Adam Silver. He said, after the September 10th NBA owners meeting, Adam Silver said, I'd frankly never heard the company Aspiration before, and I'd never heard a whiff of anything around an endorsement deal with Kawhi or anything around engagement with the Los Angeles Clippers, so it was all new to me. This is Pablo Torre quoting Adam Silver. And then Mr. Torre, as of Tuesday, so as of yesterday, he said, but Pablo finds out just obtained a copy of Aspiration's $300 million plus founding sponsorship agreement, which must be submitted prior to its execution for NBA's approval and shall not be effective or enforceable until it is expressly approved by the NBA. So essentially, there's a document that says that the league office gets that says that the Clippers and Aspiration are going to do something together sponsor-wise, right? But the question is, does Adam Silver see those things? Because there's a lot of people under Adam Silver. So Pablo Torre responds or continues his thread by saying two immediate questions. One, why did Steve Ballmer's $300 million plus Aspiration partnership not reach Adam Silver's office before it was expressly approved? And to that, I'm going to answer, do you think Adam Silver gets consulted on every sponsorship deal made in this league? Like, how much do you think he actually does? You know what I'm saying? That's absurd, in my opinion, for Pablo to even make that claim. There's so many people under Adam Silver. You think Adam Silver sees every brand that's partnered up with an NBA team? No way. And then number two, he says, did no one inform Silver that Bloomberg reported on January 18th, 2024 that Aspiration was being investigated by the federal government? No, because he's got other things to deal with. Pablo Torre, he's got other things to deal with. And then Pablo continues to say, over the first two seasons of their sponsorship, obviously 2021-22 and 22-23, Aspiration had to put $7.5 million per year into the Clippers. Meanwhile, Steve Ballmer and the Clippers kept putting millions into Aspiration, which owed Kawhi Leonard $7 million a year in a secret deal nobody ever spoke publicly about. Again, this has nothing to do with Adam Silver. I know this is happening in his league, but this is between the Clippers and Aspiration, and then separately Kawhi and Aspiration. Legally in those documents. So Pablo continues to say, fraudsters running companies like Aspiration or FTX keep sport washing for a reason. Hugely visible deals with pro sports teams and leagues create the public impression of trust and credibility, as if such deals must have been vetted by the teams and leagues, but apparently not. So, Torre is trying to call Silver out, that like, how did he not know anything? There's just so many people under Adam Silver, though. I don't think that that's a great point. So I don't know. Pablo's, trying to do his best to get us caught because he's going to look good by doing it. Of course, he's the one that broke the story. I get it. As a journalist, I get it. Now, let's start talking about Mark Cuban, because this is going to last a while because there's so much that he's brought to the table, but I think it's relevant information. I was talking about it on the last episode, and so someone replied to one of his tweets saying, by quoting him and saying, because Cuban said, how does any rumor in any office, Cuban asked, how does any rumor in an office start, to explain the unexplainable? So somebody commented, so how do you know if they didn't know? The former co-CEO, Andre Cherny, who we spoke about in the last podcast, and the incarcerated co-CEO, Joseph Sandberg, were both dishonest, including recently, according to Pablo Torre's reporting. Who says the co-CEOs are telling the truth here when one is going to jail and the other was caught lying about being asked for an interview with Torre? He even lied about a character limit despite having ample space with his verified account. How does a rumor form without originating from within the company? It doesn't arise out of thin air. Suppose they knew nothing about it beforehand and were completely unaware of salary cap issues before joining the company. The fact that they gained this knowledge during their work could suggest they obtained it from inside the company. So this person is trying to insinuate, that the employees that Pablo anonymously had on his show, they didn't just make stuff up or say cap circumvention. They're just saying it out of nowhere. They're getting it from somewhere. So essentially, he is saying that to Mark Cuban. And then Mark Cuban said, neither Pablo or I know who is right. Joe Sandberg and Uncle Dennis probably are the only two who truly know. Everything I have ever seen in business and the NBA says the conclusion that Pablo is trying to suggest that there was a CBA violation and collusion is wrong. He obviously feels the opposite, which is what makes this interesting, but it is a certainty that neither of us have proven anything. So Mark Cuban has been on record over and over again saying that Joe Sandberg and Uncle Dennis are really the only people that know. Steve Ballmer, because Mark Cuban's taken our side, right? So he's claiming that Steve Ballmer had no idea about the deal, which Steve Ballmer also claims, and that Pablo Torre is using a lot of conjecture and circumstantial evidence to make this conclusion that we are using Aspiration, or did use Aspiration, to pay Kawhi Leonard under the table. Pablo Torre took some exception to that response by saying neither Pablo or I know who is right, by replying, and this was the last exchange between Torre and Mark Cuban as of this episode, where he said, disagree. This is Pablo Torre speaking now. Disagree. This entire weekend, you have conclusively proven that you are by no means too swamped right now to answer questions on Pablo Finds Out, as you claimed in an email on Thursday afternoon after the Dennis Wong episode dropped. And here's the thing about Mark Cuban. He already apparently, and the episode is out, he went on Pablo Torre's podcast already, but apparently it was a 3-hour show cut down to an hour and a half. So Mark Cuban spent 3 hours of his time going on this show. He went on road tripping with Allie Clifton, Richard Jefferson, Channing Frye, and those guys. So, he's not just going to come on podcasts every second, but I think for Mark Cuban, this is interesting because it involves ownership and, it's stuff that he is very familiar with or right up his alley. So it's something that, entertains him to a large degree. But anyway, he goes, so this is Mark Cuban now as of 3 days ago. This is If today is September 17th, this was Sunday. He said, ad hoc, he replies to Pablo, ad hoc posts fit the schedule a little easier, but I have some questions for you since you have all the docs and internal connects. Would you publish a smoking gun right now if you had one? Why not publish the docs you have, the emails from Sandberg? You showed us some docs. Why not show the ones you reference that we have to take your word on? Particularly since other media said they had seen internal docs as well. None have come out with anything relevant to the CBA since your reporting. And did you ask your internal sources if they said anything to KPMG before they resigned because of suspected revenue fraud, or the internal committee they put together to investigate the fraud, but apparently shockingly found nothing? Let's just stop right there, right? This is me talking now. Let's just stop right there. Mark Cuban is essentially saying what I said 2 episodes ago, where I said Pablo should release everything. Not release everything, but certain things that he is leaving out matter. The emails from Joseph Sandberg, the other documents he has that he's referencing. Pablo's choosing to release what he wants, which is why I'm saying, and this is not me just, first of all, let me be very clear. This is me, Darian Vaziri, Dime Dropper, speaking right now to the audience. I am not saying we are innocent, and I am not saying we are guilty. It is my job to give both sides. I'm not going to sit here like everybody else that's not a Clipper fan wants and say, oh, we're guilty, we're screwed, we cheated. Why would I say that when there has not been a formal conclusion? I am not going to just take Pablo Torre's word on it because it sounds good and he's done a good job with this case. And I'm also not going to take Mark Cuban's word on it. Mark Cuban is just questioning Pablo Torre's reporting. Why should nobody question him? Is my thing. Why should nobody question him? It's my job to report the facts and what's going on and the discussion that's being had about this, because I'm not smart enough and business savvy enough to bring up all these questions that Mark Cuban's bringing up. So I'm just kind of relaying the information to the public as a reporter myself, as someone that's an information giver myself, or provider, I should say. So let's continue with what he was saying, right? Now I'm back. Now Cuban's talking again. If the Ballmer 50-12 was directed to Kawhi Leonard, as your sources said, why was he only paid $3.5 million and then not paid again till after the next raise in December 2022 and never got his last $7 million? Will you correct your attached reporting, which implied the $50 million was for his $28 million? And by the way, they actually paid $29 million in carbon credits for the World Cup. One of your execs asked for cash escrow. Sandberg got an email from the other side, and Sandberg overruled the exec and did no cash escrow. Crazily enough, the company got sued and the judge ruled they should get the $29 million back. Why does this matter? It further shows that Sandberg ran everything. He was in charge of everything. I'll say it again. The only people who know what happened are Sandberg and Kawhi Leonard. And if they collected the $29.5 million judgment, none of it went to Kawhi Leonard. End quote. So again, Mark Cuban doubling down on his Sandberg is the crook. It's all about Sandberg. You need to talk to Sandberg, because it's a little suspicious, as I said, that, Kawhi was paid a little bit and then he didn't get paid again, and then Wong got money. The Wong thing made it very suspicious against the Clippers, where Kawhi was late on getting paid because they didn't have money allegedly and they were going down the tube, aspiration. Dennis Wong puts in $1.99 million because Kawhi hasn't gotten paid, and then Kawhi gets paid 9 days later. That's the conclusion that Pablo drew, that was very suspicious. And I'm not going to lie. I would be lying if I said it wasn't suspicious. So in the replies, you had a lot of people coming at Mark Cuban. One of them who said, if you had a smoking gun, would you publish it now? And why not release the Sandberg docs you referenced, since other outlets claim to have seen them too? And Mark Cuban responded honestly. He said, Pablo has the documents. He said he has thousands of them. I don't have anything that isn't public. And then a guy that actually replied to me and was going back and forth with me, that claims to be a Sacramento Kings fan lawyer, it's at Legal Moves Only, shout out to this guy, went back and forth with Mark Cuban, and it was a very interesting discussion. So coming up, I'm going to be relaying that discussion and what their words mean or could imply. Going to be talking about that coming up. I got to tell you a little something about 5 Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-hour energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with zero sugar and zero crashes. The best thing about 5-hour energy is how portable they are and how easy they are to carry around. They're just those little bottles. You can get them from anything, 7-Eleven, your local convenience store, and it's basically just a caffeine shot on the go. My favorite flavor, I don't really drink caffeine, I can't lie, but I do like the raspberry flavor. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-hour energy shots. Get the favorites you love or be bold and try something new in store and online at www.5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. Alrighty, so continuing the discussion between Mark Cuban and Twitter, I should say, everybody against the Clippers. So this guy, the commenter, says, you are very much over your skis with this one, referring to Cuban. You presume that the 50 was for the 28 means that the 50 had to be held in some sort of escrow and be directly traceable. Wrong. Cash is fungible. So he's saying just because, that $50 million was spent and they didn't have enough to pay Kawhi Leonard does not mean that Ballmer didn't put money in that ended up with the intention of going to Kawhi, right? And then Mark Cuban said, of course it is. So you are saying it wasn't available to pay off all the $28 million, or actually no more than $3.5 million, according to Pablo, meaning it wasn't circumvention. So Cuban's saying, well, if Ballmer paid all this, invested all this money, and the money is supposed to go from aspiration, or should I say Ballmer to Kawhi, why were they short payments? Why were they not paying him on time? That money had to have been spent somewhere. And so this guy said, I'm saying it doesn't matter whether the 50 was parked in escrow or spent elsewhere. It doesn't have to be earmarked or directly spent on Kawhi. It offsets other expenses by 50. The point isn't traceability, it's obligation. So he's saying it doesn't matter if the exact 50 million or the 28 million went to, or it's 50 that they're accusing us of, because the 48 million that Kawhi is supposed to get paid, 50 million that Ballmer invested. So he's saying it doesn't matter if that exact $50 million went to Kawhi Leonard, right? He's saying that as long as Ballmer spent or invested 50 million for that money to go back to Kawhi, that's all that matters. It's the obligation, it's the intention, right? But Cuban saying, there's no proof, there's no trace. So Cuban responds by saying, if Sandberg felt he had the obligation to, which he memorialized in a contract, he failed. In fact, they were in arrears after only 2 payments. When the company declared CH11, they still owed him $7 million. So the other $300 million plus raised that was not from Ballmer was not used to pay Kawhi Leonard either. So Cuban is saying, Sandberg this, Sandberg that. He failed. Obviously, the bankruptcy happened. They still owed Kawhi Leonard $7 million. So then this guy replies, there's documentary evidence that Joe Sandberg felt obligated to continue to pay Kawhi Leonard even in December of 2022, when, as I'm talking now, when they were apparently late to pay Kawhi. Now back to this guy. And the fact that Aspiration only owed $7 million means he paid $21 million, meaning he kept paying after the Clips defaulted Aspiration. And I would analyze that tweet right now, but Cuban is going to say exactly what I'm going to say right now. He said maybe because he had a contract and the person who he had a contract with might threaten to sue. Based on the parties involved, that would not surprise me the least bit. And if there was a lawsuit and a scammer gets deposed, goodbye scam, only Sandberg and Kawhi Leonard know. But you are right, he kept paying until there was $7 million left to pay. But none of that has any reasonable explanation to tie it back to Ballmer other than speculation for fun and clicks. So in that statement, Cuban makes a good point. I don't understand what that guy's point is that, Aspiration was still paying Kawhi after the Clippers stopped. Again, in this exchange, Kawhi Leonard has a sponsorship deal with Aspiration, and the Clippers have a sponsorship deal with Aspiration. So if there's a contract, and we've seen the details that Kawhi Leonard was supposed to get paid $28 million, then they still have to abide by that and still pay him. Now, of course, the real crux of this is why would Aspiration pay Kawhi Leonard $28 million, which is an insane amount of money, to not promote them at all? But again, Andre Cherny, the co-CEO, claimed, as I talked about in the last episode, that he actually was supposed to do stuff. And then he got, he left the company, so he wasn't able to oversee that partnership. So then this guy, Legal Moves Only on Twitter, responded with, that contract was an illusory contract, unenforceable in any court of law. You know that. Also practically unenforceable because no way Kawhi sues to try to enforce. You can't keep hiding behind it was a scam. The perfect accomplice for Ballmer is a scammer. So in Cuban replies, Pablo had his lawyer look at the contract. He wouldn't have said it was unenforceable. The CEO said the contract was not out of the ordinary and the marketing people were looking for ways to use him. The majority shareholder said he was so committed to it that he would give Kawhi Leonard $20 million of his own stock. Pablo talked to the former HC of Aspire. Why didn't he recommend that Aspire stop paying it? Because it was unenforceable. So how do you see it was unenforceable? I mean, again, I agree with Mark there, and it's not just because I'm a Clipper fan. He's bringing up good points. And then the guy says, I don't care about the CEO's interpretation of the contract. He's not a lawyer. Basic contract principles in all 50 states would lead to the conclusion this is an illusory contract. Is it arguably? Sure. But practically, Kawhi Leonard isn't suing on this fake deal. Now, for those that don't know what an illusory contract is, I will define that for you because I know that some of this lingo can be, a little complicated. An illusory contract is an agreement that seems like a contract but is actually unenforceable because one party makes a promise that is vague, conditional, or doesn't impose a real obligation, creating a lack of mutuality and consideration, which I think based on the facts that we've been told, that's pretty true for this contract. Because it does seem like a contract, but one party made a promise that was vague and doesn't impose a real obligation on Kawhi. That was Aspiration's whole thing about if he finds it in his beliefs. But again, Andre Cherny denies that. Andre Cherny denies it, that he had nothing to do. So then the funny part is they continue. I just thought this was a very fascinating exchange because this guy was a lawyer and he was bringing up points. The guy said, final point, Cherny says the contract was fine, but he left shortly after it was signed. The top leadership at Aspire did not approve of the contract. I talked about this yesterday. Their objections were overruled and eventually they were fired by Sandberg. Why? Who told them this deal was sacrosanct? And then Mark Cuban goes back to it. Sandberg, obviously. When he said top leadership, Sandberg didn't have an executive position. He was on the board, largest shareholder, and obviously made all the big decisions, and everyone realized they had to go along. He wouldn't let finance see the letter of intent contracts or talk to those customers and more. So just saying he wanted $28 million to go to Kawhi Leonard and gave him stock doesn't appear to be out of character for him or how people responded to him. I wish someone had talked to the new CEO who was promoted around October of 2022. It would be really interesting to hear what she had to say. In any event, as I said before, read up on the lawsuit over the 29.5 in carbon credits. Their GC smartly asked for cash escrow in case the credits weren't delivered. The other party emailed Sandberg, who immediately overruled the GC and told the other side he would get it done without cash escrow, which he did. This is 29.5 to be paid effectively immediately. He approved it in an email overriding his execs for carbon credits that wouldn't be available for years. And as it turned out, the vendor did default. In the peak of irony, the vendors sued saying they had no obligations because of what Sandberg did, but the judges ruled otherwise and required the vendor to return the 29.5. I don't know if they collected, but if they did in 2024, it didn't go to Kawhi Leonard. So essentially, now it's me talking again. I know that I keep saying that for the people that are on audio. Mark Cuban keeps saying, you got to talk to Sandberg. You got to talk to Sandberg. I know it sounds fishy, but everything about Sandberg is fishy, is what he's saying. He was a scammer. He's going to jail. So, his motives to paying Kawhi Leonard and whatnot, we don't know. We don't know what his whole thing is, what his whole shtick is. So that's something that is very, very interesting to talk about, right? Very interesting. We're not going to know. It is what it is, right? It is what it is. So I don't know. Mark Cuban keeps going back and forth having these discussions. I think they're all relevant and interesting because as a Clipper fan, He's been our biggest defendant so far. So if I'm doing a Clippers podcast, which I am the host of, and I've covered this team now for 5 years on my own YouTube channel and been a fan for 20 years, I'm going to give our side. I'm not just going to sit here and say we're guilty every second and that there's nothing to talk about. There's a lot to talk about because this is the hottest story in the NBA, and I'm the locked on host of this show. So when Mark Cuban's going to bat for us like this and he has more knowledge on this stuff than I am going to relay that information, especially when a lot of people don't have Twitter, and aren't seeing these discussions, and it's the most public place where he's doing this. So it was very, very, very interesting, to say the least. And another guy said to Mark on the same thread, the purchase agreement for the Series C4 shares Polpat acquired specifically stated that $29 million of the total will be put into escrow to be withdrawn incrementally, originally at Polpat's discretion, later changed to give Aspiration sole discretion on timing of withdrawals. As you can see in the Form S4 filing, Aspiration drained that account almost immediately, which was probably part of their fraud, and explains why they didn't have the money to pay later installments. But none of that rules out cap circumvention. So he's saying, just because the money was spent and it wasn't there doesn't mean that it rules out that Ballmer still tried to pay Kawhi Leonard under the table. And then Mark Cuban said, Ballmer said Aspiration asked him to introduce it to Leonard. We even found the email that makes the first introduction. It was early November. Ballmer started negotiating the deal in August of 2021. After the merger agreement was signed, they closed the deal and funded September 14th, 2021. As part of that September 14th close, Ballmer put money in escrow. However, Aspiration took all the escrow money before they were even introduced to Kawhi. The escrow money closings from the S4 at subsequent closings on October 15th, 28th, November 2nd, November 12th, and November 16th, 2021. Aspiration grabbed more than half the money in escrow before Ballmer made the Kawhi introduction. There was no CBA violation. Want to know where a chunk of that money Want to know where a chunk of that money went? Subsequent to September 30th, 2021, Aspiration paid RJB Partners $10,013,455 for consulting services. Sandberg controls this specific apogee and others that got paid. And remember, the merger deal was signed August 16th, 2021? The merger would bring in $285 million more from Interprivate, I think it's Interprivate 3. So everyone thought there would be a huge payday, including Ballmer, including Oaktree, including Sandberg. They all had been told it would happen by year end, and then by end of Q1 2022. And this was after KPMG resigned and refused to approve their audit. You had Interprivate with $285 million of real money from heavy hitters. That dwarfed Ballmer in contribution, and maybe in 2021 in net worth of their investors doing complete DD. Sandberg was a Madoff-level scammer. And then he posts the S4 with all the details. So again, right there, Cuban is also saying Aspiration took all the escrow money that Ballmer invested before they were even introduced to Kawhi Leonard. Or should it say, he corrected that and said the second mention saying they took most of the money before Aspire met Kawhi Leonard is accurate. Also, they took all the money before Kawhi Leonard registered their company. So let's repeat it so it's easy to understand. Aspire took most of the escrow money and the first $20 million before Ballmer introduced Aspire to Kawhi's team. Hard to say Ballmer invested to give money to Kawhi if most of the $50 million is gone before Aspire even met Kawhi. But again, that goes back to what that other guy was saying, that just because the exact money was spent doesn't mean that Ballmer didn't do it to circumvent the salary cap. So again, it's a lot of just both sides talking right now. But Cuban said, verdict, Ballmer's not the father of the CBA violation. So again, it's just very back and forth. Each side is believing what they want. The guy that was replying to him said, I think the crux of your argument is that SB, Steve Ballmer, has an email that is somehow a reverse smoking gun. And the guy says, I would counter that A, he hasn't actually shown it to anyone, and B, I'm not sure that would really be so persuasive anyways. Doesn't Ballmer have every incentive to lie and cover his tracks here? And Cuban goes, the reality is this. Once he mentioned it to ESPN in the interview, he will have to show it to the NBA. More importantly, he also referenced he found it while helping the Fed's investigation of the scam. If the email was presented to the Feds, do you think there's any way it's fake? And if it's not fake, then it's the reverse smoking gun because Aspiration took out most of the money before there was ever an intro to Kawhi Leonard. And we know with complete certainty that the money was all gone by the time Kawhi was registered. So the guy says, I definitely don't think he's forging an email. I meant cover their tracks, like send a symbolic introductory email, even though / if a deal was already made. And then Mark Cuban said, Steve Ballmer, Joe Sandberg can't make a deal for Kawhi. Sandberg has to negotiate that directly. Only Kawhi Leonard knows what works for them. So there's a lot more to it, and I'm going to be giving a lot more in the following episodes because we're out of time right now. I'm also going to be talking about a hit piece. I don't want to call it a hit piece, but a piece made about why the Clippers need to move off Kawhi and why the Kawhi Leonard era essentially has been disaster. That was written by Baxter Holmes. There's just so much to talk about on this stuff, and I don't know. It's the dog days of the offseason right now, so why not just repeat all the facts? Mark Cuban's tirade. If you want to go check all these tweets out that I'm reciting, go to Twitter. If you don't have Twitter, that's why I'm here for you. But I just think it's very interesting to analyze these angles. And especially for those of you that know more about the business side, know more about these technical terms than me, then you guys can come up with your own conclusions as well. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DimeDropperPod. Subscribe to my own YouTube channel, Dime Dropper, for even more LA Clipper, LA Sports, and NBA content. We'll have this entire saga covered for you as it occurs right here on Locked On Clippers. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell on the road to 8,000 subscribers. The age-old proverb continues, go Clippers.